My name is Halfia and I'm 38 years old. As a surf instructor and surfboard rental provider in Bali, I hope the arrival of tourists coming back to the island can give us a chance to work again. The Indonesian island is going to welcome back tourists from 5 countries from October the 14th. Many other destinations which rely heavily on tourists are also opening up to holidaymakers. But with the pandemic still not under control, is the time really ripe for international travel?
Hello and welcome to our COVID-19 special. I'm Monica Jones in chilly Berlin. Yes, it's October and it's gone cold here. But luckily, from November onward, warm holiday destinations like Thailand open up for vaccinated visitors. For the tourism sector there, this move doesn't come a moment too soon.
Empty beaches as far as the eye can see on Phuket, Thailand's most important tourist island, where tourists flocked in droves before the pandemic. Hayo van Keller could never have imagined this holiday paradise could be so empty and for so long at that. But Thailand was locked down very quickly right at the beginning of the pandemic, largely cut off from the outside world. We used up our last reserves to air the rooms, to keep the staff employed, to make some improvements to the resort, because we were hoping that in winter there would be a bit of business again. Then that didn't happen. And then we really had to slam on the emergency brakes. He tried to keep his 80 employees on for as long as possible. Now he barely has enough work for 33 of them. And most of that is only part-time. Tourists have only been allowed to enter Thailand again since the 1st of July this year, under a pilot project called the Phuket Sandbox, a program with strict anti-coronavirus measures. Would-be tourists have to provide a ream of documentation to enter the country, proof of vaccination, health insurance, special hotel bookings, a negative corona test, to name only a few. For many it's just too much bureaucracy. The movements of those who make it to Phuket are tracked by phone app for at least a week. Their body temperature checked daily. On top of that, further corona PCR tests are required, paid for up front before even leaving home. For a family, the extra costs can quickly add up to €1,000. It's not the right time yet for mass tourism. At the moment, you have to say that these are all individual travellers who really want to travel and who have a particular reason to travel. Like here, for example, we have the Ayurveda program, which you won't find easily elsewhere in the world. But the many small hotels, shops and restaurants that tourist hotspots like Carter Beach are known for may have a long, dry spell ahead of them. When the pandemic hit, a lot of them just shut their doors. There was hardly any help from the state, and the banks wouldn't give credit either. Running a restaurant or a hotel costs money, even when they don't have any guests, even if they only have a few rooms. Equipment and facilities have to be kept in working order. Taps have to be run regularly. You can't just close down and open up again later. Hayo van Keller expects his hotel to have enough guests again in a few weeks. Then, bit by bit, he can hire staff again. But the recovery will take a long time.
Well, let's just have a quick look now at how hard the COVID-19 restrictions have hit the tourism industry worldwide. Data from the German Statistics Office show that more than 100 million jobs were lost across the globe last year. The Asian-Pacific region suffered the most. Almost 64 million people lost their livelihoods in the hospitality sector there. Europe, Northern America, Africa and other regions were also affected by job losses. And for more, I'm joined now by Sandra Carvao. She's Chief of Tourism Market Intelligence and Competitiveness at the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Good to have you with us. We've just heard in this report, big holiday destinations are slowly opening up again. But given the pandemic is still ongoing, does this worry you? Or is this the right step in the right direction?
It's definitely the right step, and in the sense that those destinations are opening naturally after carefully having considered that decision. We have seen here in Europe how that has happened over the last 2 months. The important thing is obviously always to keep in mind the security of the tourists, the visitors, but also of the employees. And we are seeing that countries are doing it in a gradual way, communicating clearly about the protocols that need to be implemented by the destinations. But as it was mentioned, the impact is huge on the economic side, but particularly on the social side. And it is very important to get those jobs back.
Right. Before we continue with the economic side of this, I mean, the coronavirus is airborne, we know that, but it didn't travel all the way from China around the world on its own. How big a role did and does tourism play in spreading the virus?
Well, I think that's the issue that we need to consider in all situations that have to do with health and traveling. And this pandemic was also an important point for the sector to be prepared for this type of crisis. Many measures were implemented after other crises, and we've seen how the sector has adapted very quickly with specific protocols. Also, the scientific knowledge of the disease has evolved over time, and the industry, together with the rest of society, because at the end of the day, we're talking travel as a part of the rest of society. We've seen how it has impacted our daily lives in our own countries, in our own cities, in our own neighborhoods. So the most important lesson is to be able to adapt to the scientific evidence that emerges in terms of traveling.
And of course, I mean, all the safety measures, they cost money, they're time-consuming, they're sometimes a bit complex, and they can put people off. And we've seen in this report how major holiday destinations like Thailand suffered economically because of lockdowns and restrictions. Do you think that the concept of mass tourism is dead now?
Well, I think we will see a change in perception. We've seen during the lockdown, as countries would open, people would tend to have a higher level of demand for open air spaces, natural environments, rural destinations. We've seen a boom of many rural destinations during the opening up. But I think the most important thing is there is a huge pent-up demand as well. People, whenever the circumstances and the protocols change, we see that bookings increase. But we also know that people will probably have a concept of enjoying more local destinations. They will have a more responsible attitude towards travel. So we will probably see an acceleration of some of the trends towards sustainability that we were seeing before the pandemic.
So do you think that there is perhaps even an upside to the pandemic in the way how travel destinations can become more resilient, more sustainable?
Well, I think we've lived a crisis unparalleled. Just to give you an idea, the international tourism numbers went back to 30 years ago. This means many livelihoods at risk, as we saw before. But obviously, we need to take it as an opportunity to rethink how destinations develop, how tourists, and we all are tourists, how we behave when we travel, also for the industry. And we've seen renewed commitments for many tour operators. The airlines just recently renewed their commitment to fight climate change. So it's also a moment to stop and rethink, and as you mentioned, to make destinations more resilient towards diversification of markets, diversification of products, make them more sustainable. So rethink your structures and really, as we say, build back better in a way that's beneficial to everyone.
Okay, Sandra Carvalho from the United Nations World Tourism Organization, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Time now for your questions. Here's our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
I have to travel the day after getting vaccinated. Will it affect my PCR test?
No, it won't. PCR, or polymerase chain reaction tests, are the gold standard when it comes to detecting an active infection with COVID-19. They work by amplifying genetic material that's unique to the virus up to detectable levels. The science behind exactly why vaccines can't cause a positive PCR result is kind of complicated, but basically boils down to the fact that most vaccines don't use a full version of the real virus to kickstart your immune response. Instead, they're based on short stretches from the SARS-CoV-2 genome, which don't replicate and actually degrade quite quickly in cells. And those stretches are not detected or amplified by PCR. But what about the vaccines that are made by inactivating whole viruses? There are a couple of them out there. Well, they won't cause a positive PCR test either, according to the experts. And one big reason for that is because of where the samples for testing are taken, which is from swabbing your nose and or your throat. Current vaccines, no matter what platform they're based on, are generally injected into your upper arm, and they're quickly broken down by the immune system as it learns how to recognize SARS-CoV-2. And because inactivated viruses are also unable to replicate, they don't reach the mucosal cells in the throat or in the nose. So if your PCR swab returns a positive result, it's almost certainly because you either currently have or have recently recovered from COVID-19. Vaccines don't affect the test.
Get vaccinated or get booted. That's the choice Boeing gives its employees. By December, all the airline's employees must either present a vaccination certificate or prove they're exempt due to a disability or sincerely held religious belief. The move follows a White House announcement saying government contractors must be vaccinated by December the 8th. That's all. Thanks for watching.